Thanks, Heather. And Lisa, thank you as well. So here we are, the first day of Hanukkah, 1 week from winter solstice, 11 days from Christmas. It is a time of holidays and of holy days. In the midst of all of this, let's remember to slow down, to savor those days, to be present to each of those days and to one another. This is a season of holidays and of holy days. And the celebration of Christmas itself has a long and complex back and forth dance with solstice and with other pagan and earth-centered and pre-Christian holidays that have shaped and have influenced the symbols and practices that fill the holiday season, that fill the Christmas season. Solstice, Saturnalia, Yule, and other pre-Christian traditions have brought us holly and mistletoe, decorated trees, gift-giving, feasts, and even the date of December 25th as a day of celebration. All have their roots in our pre-Christian ancestors and hold a special place with contemporary practitioners of earth and goddess-centered spirituality. 21 years ago, the conservative pundit Bill O'Reilly coined the phrase "war on Christmas," which has now become an annual focus within conservative circles. But believe it or not, there once really was a war on Christmas, and it was actually waged by the Puritans. The Puritans, in the early days of the United States, hated Christmas. Of course, it wasn't Christmas in the way that we celebrate it or think about it now. In England, Christmas was a lot like Mardi Gras. It was a wild party with people wandering around, drinking and singing. It's called wassailing, just like the song, "Here We Come A-Wassailing." And the Puritans hated that. And they hated those pagan connections to the symbols and practices. They were totally aware of those connections, and they hated those connections. And when it came down to it, they really thought the whole thing was anti-biblical. The Bible never really says when the birth of Jesus was. So when the Puritans came to the United States, they did everything they possibly could to end the celebration of Christmas. They ordered that shops stay open on Christmas Day. Some businesses even started their business earlier in the day, starting as early as 5 a.m., opposed to the standard 7 a.m., starting earlier to discourage the observation of Christmas. They banned holiday cakes and candles. The Massachusetts Congress declared Christmas as illegal from 1659 to 1681, and anyone caught celebrating Christmas would be fined. Christmas was actually illegal in New England for over 150 years. So if there was a war on Christmas, it was the Puritans that were not only waging it, but for a time they really seemed to be winning it. Their influence was so strong that Christmas Day didn't become a national holiday until 1870. It was our forebears, the Universalists, those Universalists who believed that God is love and that all are saved, that began to celebrate Christmas by gathering in their churches with friends and family. Beginning to celebrate Christmas Day that way as early as 1789. They promoted the celebration of Christmas as a celebration of community within their churches. The Universalists in Boston gathered together to celebrate Christmas with one another as a family and as a community celebration, even before they had an actual church building. And long before the Unitarians and the Universalists merged, they were influencing one another. So the Unitarians picked up on this idea of the Christmas holiday as a time of promoting togetherness and thought, let's also work towards making that a public holiday, a public recognition of togetherness and of generosity. So it was the Unitarians and the Universalists working together that tried to get businesses and schools to close on Christmas so that families and friends could spend time together. And that was a very controversial idea at the time. You know, taking time off work and closing businesses was unheard of. And equally controversial was the Unitarians' promotion of celebrating Christmas by giving to the poor. Conservative religions then were promoting the idea that your wealth was connected to your soul, and that the poor were damned by their own sin. In the words of Herman Cain, if you're poor, blame yourself, right? The poor were to be punished, an idea that continues to persist in different ways to this day. But the Unitarians, they envisioned a celebration of Christmas that affirmed the value of generosity and of care for one another, particularly the poor and disadvantaged. And that it was really important, particularly important, to teach these values to children. So the Universalists and the Unitarians began to shape a public and family-friendly celebration of Christmas that centered their values rather than their theology. The theology was implied and underneath, but it wasn't necessarily the piece that was promoted. That while the story of Jesus was not ignored or not left out, the emphasis was on public and secular celebration of joy, of hope, of wonder, of love, compassion, and peace. And they began to reclaim some of that imagery and experiment with different ways of celebrating together. And in the process, they created and shaped some of the Christmas traditions that feel so familiar to us today. So while Christmas trees have pagan roots, and the custom of Christmas trees was brought to the United States by German and Dutch immigrants, the practice became more widespread around the country when Charles Follin, a Harvard professor and a Unitarian Universalist minister, decorated a Christmas tree in his home with his family. This Christmas tree that was covered with ornaments made from eggshells and lit with candles. And he invited a group of friends to his home to celebrate, and including Harriet Martineau and Catherine Sedgwick, who were both Unitarians and both were writers. So Harriet and Catherine both wrote popular articles about this Christmas tree and this practice of the celebrating and decorating the Christmas tree. And that just became increasingly widespread among Unitarians and among the public at large in the celebration of Christmas. Another Unitarian minister, Samuel Coleridge, had visited Germany, and he saw this ritual with a family ritual of exchanging gifts. And he was so taken with that, especially the idea that children were giving gifts to their parents. And so he wrote about this. He wrote about this in the most prominent Unitarian magazine at the time, and he proposed it as a way of teaching children the practice of generosity. Maybe one of the most influential transformations of the Christmas holiday and celebration came in 1823, when the poem A Visit from St. Nicholas, now commonly known as 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, was written by Clement Moore and illustrated by the political cartoonist Thomas Nast. Now, some say that Clement Moore was a Unitarian. Some say he was Anglican. Some say he was a sometimes part-time Unitarian. And the records weren't always clear then, right? But Thomas Nast was an active Unitarian, and besides his portrayal of Santa in 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, he completed, over a 20-year period of time, 76 different engravings of Santa. Santa with his sleigh, Santa with his reindeer, Santa in his red suit, Santa with his bag of toys, Santa in his toy shop, his elves, his house at the North Pole, where Santa could make and deliver toys to children all around the world. So Thomas Nast showed us a Santa who was for children everywhere, no matter what their faith, no matter where they lived in the world. And here's something to think about, a connection I just made recently when I was comparing these different dates, that Thomas Nast's illustrations were published in the magazine Harper's Bazaar in 1863. The Civil War was from 1861 to 1865. So imagine children and families seeing these illustrations and the joy and meaning of seeing these illustrations in the midst of the Civil War. A reminder that all children deserve kindness. Unitarian poets, songwriters, and musicians frequently tied Christmas together with messages of justice, of peace, and of goodwill. The writer and Unitarian Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote the poem Christmas Bells, which became set to music. I hear the bells on Christmas Day. And that was written months before the end of the Civil War, with lyrics that mourn the impacts of war and call for peace on earth in each verse. Unitarian minister and the abolitionist Edmund Sears wrote, "It Came Upon a Midnight Clear," as both a Christmas song and protest against the Mexican-American War. Now considered a Christmas classic, it was controversial at the time and was very criticized by Christian conservatives. It was a Unitarian minister, John Sullivan Dwight, who translated O Holy Night from its original French, a carol that was denounced by the Catholic Church in France because the person who wrote the lyrics was a socialist and the person who wrote the music was Jewish. But John Sullivan Dwight translated that from French to English, and then the song became popular among abolitionists because of that third verse that was added by Dwight. Truly he taught us to love another. His law is love and his gospel is peace. Chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. It was in the midst of the Cuban Missile Crisis that Unitarian Universalist Noel Regney composed the song, Do You Hear What I Hear?, with its refrain, Pray for peace, people everywhere. Pray for peace, people everywhere, a prayer we still need. And perhaps one of the seminal Christmas stories rooted in Unitarian and Universalist values is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens met Unitarians Ralph Waldo Emerson and William Ellery Channing when he was in the United States, and he himself became a Unitarian, continuing to attend the Unitarian Church when he returned to London. You may recall that in A Christmas Carol, Dickens critiques the treatment of the poor and brings generosity to the forefront of Christmas. as well as time together with family and friends. The Christmas Carol is a story of transformation. Scrooge experiences a conversion, not a religious conversion, but a human conversion. Through listening, learning, reflecting on his past, reflecting on his present, reflecting on his future, his relationships, his choices, his connections to people, perhaps assisted by ghosts, perhaps assisted by spirits of Christmas, perhaps assisted by his own dreams and his own conscience. Regardless of the cause of his conversion, he has this direct experience of mystery and of wonder, and he becomes a person who helps others, and in helping others, learns to love life. He's saved from himself, and his salvation doesn't take place in the hereafter. It takes place in this life. The last lines of the story read, "Some people laughed to see the alteration in him, but he let them laugh, and little heeded them. His own heart laughed, and that was quite enough for him. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if anyone alive possessed the knowledge." So the next time you watch A Christmas Carol, no matter which version you watch, my personal favorite is the Muppets Christmas Carol. It's an annual tradition in our house. When you watch A Christmas Carol, see how many connections you're able to make to our UU principles and values. Like our forebears before us, we continue to embrace the power and the possibility of transformation. We continue to cultivate a spirit and practice of hope, of generosity and gratitude, compassionately and freely sharing our presence, our resources, and our faith. May we build upon the foundation they gave us, remembering the inherent worthiness and dignity of those impacted by poverty, and move beyond charity and beyond generosity to transform those systems designed to create poverty. And as we celebrate the holidays and holy days ahead, whichever ones you choose to celebrate, and whichever ones speak to your own heart and speak to your conscience, may we do so with a sense of wonder, and may we keep them well and with laughter in our hearts. And in the words of Tiny Tim, God bless us, everyone. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.